All right, hello and welcome to my presentation on the final media project. My name is April McKee. It's April 2021. This is for Professor Larry Holden, JRN 101, Digital and Media Literacy. So the issue I've decided to focus on for the final media project is the student loan debt crisis. This issue has been reported on a number of different media platforms. For example, news articles, podcasts, television and radio reports, etc. The target audience for the student loan debt crisis are past, current, and future students. The crisis can be seen on mainstream media outlets such as New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN websites. In this presentation, I focus specifically on New York Times, The Talk podcast, and Forbes magazine for news sources regarding the crisis. The student loan debt crisis can also be seen on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. So a little background about the student loan debt crisis issue. Since the 1999 to 2000 academic year, the net price of tuition, fees, room, and board at a public four-year college has increased a whopping 68%. The amount borrowed to go to college each year has doubled in the same time. Today, the cumulative federal student loan debt is just over $1.5 trillion. This amount has more than doubled the amount in 2010. Some 44 million Americans collectively hold over $1.6 trillion in student debt, just to give you a few statistics on how bad the issue really is and just how many Americans suffer from it. The first example of the media presentation I found comes from a New York Times article titled "Struggling with Mounting Student Debt." It appears in print media on the New York Times website. This article is essentially a cry for help from journalist Mike Edgin. He takes a realistic approach to the student loan debt crisis. Edgin does not ask for debt to be canceled, but instead suggests reasonable fees assessed on what he borrowed. He claims that his loan would be paid off much quicker if not for the exorbitant interest charge. A quote I found from the article that directly sums it up says, "I have a great career due to my education, but I shouldn't owe twice what I borrowed. I cannot retire because of these loans." Mike Edgin, New York Times, 2021. The second media presentation of the issue I found comes from the Take podcast titled "Will Biden End the Student Debt Crisis?" and it appears in podcast form audio. This podcast focuses on 2021 President Joe Biden and his plans to end the student debt crisis. The podcast talks about how Americans have some of the highest rates of student debt in the world. 92% of the debt belongs to the United States government. The Take podcast looks to President Biden to erase the debt with, quote unquote, the stroke of a pen, as they put it. Unfortunately, it just isn't that easy. The third media presentation of the issue comes from Forbes, titled "America Reacts to $1 billion of Student Loan Cancellation," and again is an example of print media, directly from the Forbes website. The Forbes article, published in 2021, discusses the student loan crisis and specifically focuses on America's reaction. This article actually sheds light on the crisis, as it calls for a soon-to-be celebration once Biden actually cancels the $1 billion of student loans. A quote from this article that I think sums it up perfectly says, "Student loan borrowers have been hoping for financial relief, and they say Biden delivered on his promise. Not only did Biden ensure student loan cancellation, but he did so in the first 100 days of his administration." Zach Friedman, Forbes, 2021. As for the target audience, I believe current students, future students, as well as past students are all to be targeted for this crisis, since they have all been impacted at one point or another, or will be in the future. This issue at hand, again, impacts this group directly, which is why I've chosen to target them specifically. Three characteristics of this specific target audience is well-educated, relatively young, mostly aged 18 to 35, and also hopeful. As for media outlets, the possible media that the message might appear in is mostly online. Some print, some websites that cater to the target audience but are also reliable, such as New York Times, Washington Post, Boston Globe, etc. And lastly, university catalogs. As for mainstream type, radio, TV, and internet, university radio station, internet news websites, as well as university catalogs, magazines, and even newspapers. For the social media type, I've chosen Facebook and Twitter. Facebook because it caters more towards adults, specifically adults that have student loan debt or are just getting over it now. And Twitter because it caters to both middle-aged and younger generations who may find themselves in the future or currently struggling to face the student debt crisis themselves. So, some characteristics of Facebook and Twitter. There are many similarities, but there are also differences within the two, and I have typed both of their different characteristics. For Facebook, it's easy to navigate and use. It's a network that joins but also informs its users, and it caters towards an adult audience. For Twitter, it releases mass amounts of information at an extremely fast-paced rate. It has only a 140 character limit and also has quick engagement. So the initial message mockup that I made for Facebook is as followed. College affordability is top priority for those who seek a higher education. Financial aid counseling and assistance are helpful, but it is simply not enough. There must be a better solution for such a big issue. In order to help students graduate faster while simultaneously maintaining their finances, it's time to invest in the higher education system so that students are able to get the help and resources they need to live a happy, enjoyable, debt-free life. And the accompanying image I chose for this post targets adults mostly because it's an adult website, or a website that caters mostly towards adult based on statistics. And the blurb says, it's coming from the mom, our little girl's first day of school. And the blurb over the little girl says, my first steps on the journey to debt. My initial message for Twitter is different and much more to the point and short, as most tweets seem to be. It is as followed. College is expensive. This is a fact that we all know to be true, but it's nearly impossible to grasp until it's too late. Affordable and accessible education is essential for the United States to maintain its position as a 21st century global leader. Join the fight against the student loan debt crisis today. And the accompanying image is much simpler, just like Twitter is, featuring a simple graphic, but also getting the message across effectively. So for my conclusion, being a student getting ready to graduate next month, my student loans have had an enormous impact on me. This project has allowed me to learn a lot about the effects of the student loan debt crisis. It is refreshing yet scary to learn about the many other people who struggle with the same issue, even years after their graduation. By making college unaffordable and student loans basically unbearable, we risk deterring our best and brightest from pursuing better education and securing a decent paying job. The student loan debt crisis has continued to grow at an insane rate. It is time for politicians to stand up and provide solutions to an issue that negatively impacts nearly half the nation. These are my references. Thank you so much for a great semester and a great class. I've learned a lot, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. Thank you so much.